the professors as well as the department wants the students to actually be involved into what they're studying.
There can be fun in learning, and there can be fun in stepping out of your comfort zone, especially with the thought of helping somebody else.
It's always a better way to look at things at a different perspective that you wouldn't have been able to while reading something as simple as a textbook.
My name is Ann Moyer, and I'm an associate professor here in the psychology department at Stony Brook University. And my work focuses on psychosocial issues surrounding cancer and cancer risk. And I also do work on research methodology and meta-analysis and synthesizing research literatures quantitatively and examining the quality of their methodology. I first got interested in really this issue of the potential disconnect between researchers and research participants. Over quite a while, there were several things that got me started thinking about this. One is that I teach an undergraduate course in research methods and writing here in the psychology department, and so we focus a lot on sort of the textbook ideas of how one is supposed to conduct research. And then I come back in the lab and it's the real world, and research doesn't always go as cleanly or as precisely as how it's set out when you're first learning how to do it. One thing that I kept on noticing is even when we're working with people who are fairly comfortable or at least familiar with researchers, i.e. our students who are in the subject pool and who participate in research as an educational endeavor, they may not still have the same kind of goals or motivations that researchers do. And sometimes I think researchers lose track of that perhaps it may not be as exciting to be a research participant as we might imagine, and the research participants may sometimes not take it seriously or be mistrustful or scared or wary or weirded out by the procedures that go on in the research lab. The term that I use is psychomethodology because one of the things that I think is really important to understand is the psychological effects of our research methodology. When they're not used on with human participants, if we have animals, for instance, who we randomly assign to one group versus another, they don't necessarily have any preferences or any knowledge that another group is receiving a different treatment. Whereas humans, as research participants, can have psychological reactions to methodologies that we kind of consider neutral or to have sort of a specific scientific purpose, but they have psychological implications or effects that may actually cause effects that will interfere with the validity of our research findings.
The participants are the engine that runs the science. And in a typical experiment in my lab, we may have 75 or 100 people participating who give us the data we need to be able to answer the specific question that we're going for. We could not begin to answer anything without people who come into the lab and very graciously listen to our instructions, repeat them back to us, do the practice, learn the moves on the simulation game, sit through what typically is a tedious experiment, and do all that without knowing what the purpose is. We don't tell them typically until the end so that we're not affecting their, the data that they give. That's a generous act, and we know it.
They're really the person who's calling the shots, and they are free to stop or withdraw or whatever once they become involved in a study. And it's okay to say, no, I'm not doing this anymore, and to just be very firm in their stance. Now, other researchers might not appreciate that, but that's something that I think that were more common knowledge that they're not a guinea pig that's going to be acted upon without their ability to decide whether or not this is something they want to do, or even once they say that they'd like to do it, that if something becomes uncomfortable during the process, that they have the ability to ask questions about everything that's going on and to be able to say, no, I no longer want to do this.
My early research looked at the impact of stress during pregnancy on birth outcomes, and particularly how stress increases a woman's risk for delivering a low birth weight baby or delivering the baby early. One of the things that we found in encouraging women to participate in our research, and most of our studies have not been funded well enough to pay people, to pay participants, is that we've appealed to people's generally good instincts and desires to help researchers. And also we've found that participating in the research itself may have been an intervention for some of these women to reduce some of the stress that they were experiencing during their pregnancy.
I learned that they're a lot more involved than I thought they would be. Everybody who's doing the research is there. You know, they're not letting me speak to one person who in turn is going to the doctors and saying, look, this is it's X, Y, and Z, this has happened. They're all involved. The doctors who are conducting the research and their assistants and the psychologists, and everybody's involved.
I think it's pretty interesting that they ask people to, you know, partake in it, to say that they have done that before, or kind of gives them a little bit of insight to, you know, research and stuff like that, and what's needed to do it.
I think especially in the context of social science, I mean, we're running relatively quick studies with large numbers of people. It can be sometimes easy to forget that each one of these people is an individual. Each one of them is giving up 30 to 60 minutes of their time. And yeah, most of them are required to do over class, but I mean, they could, I mean, there's always an out that you can, an alternate assignment, they could opt to do that. So I think it's really important to keep in mind that respect, that you're really being given a huge favor.
I would encourage that someone who is thinking about being in participating in a clinical trial to not be automatically turned off by, oh well, we're just being guinea pigs and whatever, and they're just using us for our bodies and whatnot. Because in actual fact, the care and attention and professionalism oftentimes is going to turn out to be better than you might get in clinical care. All the same, I would encourage people to get a hold of the project description and consent form before they sign it. Sometimes, as we do, we send that to people before they come so they can go over it on their own and then prepare their questions and then come so that we could talk about them.
I think there's a lack of understanding about the safeguards that are in place to protect people. Like, who knows what an IRB is, or that there are committees that convene to make sure that every research application that is being considered has to go through a very rigorous process of approval.
With regard to the IRB and the protection of human subjects, I really think it's important to go into that website and really give it a good read, because this basic education that it can give you about participating in research settings at Stony Brook, but also about running one or being a part of a team that runs one. Because the responsibility to protect human subjects at the end of the day is our responsibility. Whenever we're in contact with human subjects, whether it's us, or we're running a study as a PI, or we're research assistants, where we're really handling human subjects or human participants on a regular basis. So for all involved, it's extremely important to read this website, and there's so much information that it's really on us. It's our responsibility to get acquainted.
I learned that it's not like you're like a lab rat or anything. Like, I don't know, I feel like a lot of people who've never been in experiments, they kind of feel like the person is treated like some kind of like means to an end. But it's not really like that though. Like, your rights are being protected, and it's not like they're purposely deceiving you in any way, and everything that they're doing is like to learn about people. My mom, like, she used to think that like all studies were about like people getting shocked and for no reason or whatever. And I learned that like that's not what it's really about. There's a whole bunch of different kinds of studies.
I felt like I was fairly lucky. I kind of understood what the consequences could be, but I had the resources to understand outside the people that were telling me what the risks and the benefits were. I had the resources to understand what, and I turned down many studies because I thought the risks were too great to me. The inducements were great, but the risks were too great. This is not worth it, $1,000. I'm not going to do it. And I would say to people that are going to participate in these studies, especially pharmaceutical, that they really need to think what are the short-term and the long-term risks and benefits here.
So one thing that, there are many, many things that I could convey to budding researchers, but some of the themes that come out of this project, or what I hope is valuable about this, is to have a really good understanding of the people that are part. If you do research on human research participants, understanding the people and where they come from, and to think, I wish I could do this better. This is something I'm learning to do too, is to think where they're coming from and what might be valuable to them.
We want to talk to them on a level that helps them see that we're interested in them, that we're not just an authority figure, we're not their parents. We're very careful to help them know that everything is confidential. This is relevant to all studies depending on who your sample is really getting to understand your sample and relate to them at their level. So we study adolescents and their parents, which means we actually need to know a lot about what is important and interesting to adolescents as well as parents, and how to relate to adolescents and parents in a way that's going to help them feel most comfortable and provide the kind of information that's most useful to the research.
In doing the kind of work that I do, I've found that it's essential to forge good relationships, not only with the faculty members in some of the departments where we collaborate. In my work, it's the departments of obstetrics and gynecology, but also with the staff who actually work in these clinics. And we had to have very good rapport with the nursing staff and even the administrative staff, who would, for example, remind us on a particular day that one of our study participants had an appointment and was coming in, or had rescheduled an appointment. So forging those good relationships was critical to our work. And we found that doing things like bringing refreshments over for the clinic staff on occasion was very helpful in making sure that they understood how much we appreciated what they did for us.
There are a lot of lessons that I'd like to have students get out of being participants in experiments. One is that I want them to see how dynamic the field of research is. So we grow up on textbooks with these hard and fast, disembodied facts. And I'd like people to see that those facts come in these tiny little precious bites where, you know, we get tiny answers to specific questions, and then we as a community of scientists then need to take those little sparkles of information and turn them into an understanding of how something as complex as a human works.
Without their participation, we wouldn't have any of this information that we have. And then I guess what goes along with that is just, I just would like to remind them that we put so much work into this research. I know when you're just taking a questionnaire in a class or something like that, it doesn't seem like much to you. It's a bunch of questions, but I assure you that a lot of thought went into those questions, and you know, the more seriously that you could take it and more honest you could be, you know, even if it's not a questionnaire, if it's some type of experiment, just if you could just take it seriously, I guess, because we took it very seriously when we developed it. And you know, the information that we get from your data is so important, and we're very thankful for it.
My background is in science, and so I understand controlled experiments. And to me, it was just kind of exciting not to know if you were going to be getting the treatment or not, especially since I wasn't going to be necessarily experiencing anything from either one of the treatments. I was just feeling proud to be eligible to be involved in something like this.
Without good research, we would not be able to offer people what we can offer them today. And so for research participants, I think it's important for them to really recognize the major contribution that they're making when they participate in research. And when people are generous and honest in that way, it really moves the field forward.
You want to not only make contributions to advancing knowledge, you want to feel good about the process. And I think sort of balancing your life between what you need to do to have the professional platform to do good research, which isn't always the most important research. Sometimes you have to tweak your research a little so you can get a grant or so that you can get a publication. But if you do that too much, then you lose sort of what's the point of it all. So it's sort of finding a balance between what you need to do to have success and be professionally, have a platform where you can have graduate students and have funding for your research, and doing the research that really makes you feel that you've advanced science or advanced the quality of life for people, or whatever your goal may be in doing science.
Well, the reason why we ask students to participate in research is mainly, first and foremost, we hope it to be an educational experience for the students. Particularly Intro to Psychology is so broad. We're hoping that if students actually go to a lab and participate as a subject, that they'll have another view, that they'll know where this study of psychology is coming from, because research is really what makes psychology tick.
I learned a lot about what it feels like on the other side and what constitutes informed consent and what doesn't. And also, like I said, what some of the unexpected issues that have to be dealt with are. And I also learned more about the regulatory piece as I went along, because it was of interest to me. I mean, my main motivation was clear, but there was a side benefit for me, of participating in a process that I think is very important for society and understanding it on a different level.
After I did the experiments, I realized it's not that bad. It's actually pretty informative, and you learn a lot about studies and experiments and how they work.
I often try to participate in research studies because it's neat to see what your colleagues are doing from the inside, not to spy on them, but to sort of, I like to see what things are like from a research perspective. I trust the research process more than many people might. And I just like to see, oh, that's interesting how they're measuring this, or what is it like to wear a heart rate monitor, and so forth. Just see it from the insider's perspective.
And what keeps me going is the fact that I really love this. And I don't want, my boss to know, but I'd be happy not to get paid doing this work. Don't tell anybody that. But I'd really be happy just to do this, because I just love science and I love my topics. So that's the most important thing to me. You have to love it.
My goal in selecting an area to research would be something that I was passionate about, and for me, among the wide array of of things that you could be interested in, for children with severe psychiatric illness, I felt that I would get the most gratification from doing research that had the potential to significantly impact practice. And so trying to make that sort of contribution to evidence-based medicine for this pretty vulnerable population of patients, that was a very exciting opportunity for me.
It's magical as a career, and it's difficult to do right. And we often find in any sort of a science that the prevailing wisdom we had in being so careful about putting these little pieces of information together still lead to the wrong answer. You know, we get these sort of rude awakenings sometimes in every field. But that process isn't just something that I want people to sort of appreciate, it's something that I want people to engage in.
I was really hoping with this work to be able to bridge the disconnect between the motivations and the understandings and the goals of researchers and research participants. And I would hope that it would be something that would be of interest to both researchers to better understand where their research participants may be coming from and how they may view researchers and research and what they hope to gain from participating. And on the other side, potential research participants, whether they're students or people from the community or patients who may be invited to be in a clinical trial, for instance, for new treatments, to see the motivations of researchers, because I know, and you know, my bias is that researchers are human, caring, they're passionate about their work, and they engage in their work probably because they care about the problem that they're investigating.